It's 1982. In Verona, Italy, the most important event of the year will take place. The invention of the ciabatta bread.
Sandwiches have never been the same.
Of significantly less importance to the world was the release of Ridley Scott's film Blade Runner, which presents a dystopian future where androids are so advanced that it's hard to distinguish them from real humans, kind of like corporate CEOs. A bounty hunter called Deckard, and played by Harrison Ford, is tasked with catching a few of them who have escaped their colony and returned to Earth, and retiring them by giving them a gold Rolex or something. But things never are that simple, are they? It is based on the novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? By Philip K. Dick. It's a pretty good book. These are pretty good too. For the music, Scott brought in Vangelis, the Greek synth master and man most likely to bring about the keyboard apocalypse. Writing the success of Chariots of Fire, a movie that features probably his most recognizable composition. Vangelis brought his impeccable fashion sense to the music, and the film is now considered a classic. Bravo! If you're a fan of the film, there's a chance you might have listened to the soundtrack. I know I have, and it's pretty good. These are pretty good too. And like any album, you have your favorites. Mine were the Love Theme, with its explosively romantic saxophone. The other song that I will listen to on repeat was the only vocal track with lyrics. It is called One More Kiss, Dear. It appears in this scene.
I'm in it. Yeah, what do you want?
Ciao.
While not featured very prominently, it stands out because of its unabashedly vintage sound, evoking a bygone era. In a movie with flying cars and otherworldly technology, a song that mimics the time when records were printed on vinyl is sure to get noticed. But in this case, not only because of the contrast, but also the quality of the song itself. Blending old-sounding songs with post-apocalyptic or dystopian worlds would become something more common later on in media. One More Kiss, Dear is sung by Don Percival. Was this one more rainy day? Someone was listening to Deep Purple when they were printing this record? As one listens to a song that he enjoys, he begins to get inquisitive regarding the people involved in its production. We already know the composer, so our next question is, who's the singer? That isn't as easy an answer as one would like. And for a time when information was scarcer than it is today, there was a real mystery about it. We had a name, but it sounded like a made-up name, to my ears at least, and the complete lack of information reinforced that idea. Yet, that mystery probably enhanced its allure. The song appears in the film like something from a lost time, so it was appropriate that we knew nothing about the singer, wasn't it? It all almost never came to be, though, if things had gone according to plan.
Stop. Enhance 15 to 23. Give me a hard copy right there.
The original choice was to use an already existing song, If I Didn't Care, by the Ink Spots, a song released way back in 1939, more than 40 years before Blade Runner would hit theaters. But who were the Ink Spots? Even if you didn't ask that question, let me take the time to answer it. So we're taking a short, medium detour.
If I didn't care.
The best book on the subject, and one which I'll reference extensively, is More Than Words Can Say, The Ink Spots and Their Music, by Marv Goldberg. The official and brief origin of their name comes from a meeting the band had with their manager. What should they be called? Bland suggestions were brought up and struck down. Suggestions such as Harmony 4, Rhythm Quartet, Jazz Melodies, and many other duller ones. Amid a creative naming lull, their manager was playing with his dry pen, and as he began to shake it, 4 inkblots appeared. A flash of genius struck him, and he interjected loudly. The Ink Spots! And that was that. The first iteration of the quartet was made up of Jerry Daniels, Deke Watson, Orville Hoppy Jones, and Charlie Fuqua. Yet, I would be remiss not to mention from the beginning its most recognizable member, Bill Kenny, who would join the band a bit later, but would contribute greatly to the overall sound that they would become famous for. Originally, Charlie Fuqua and Jerry Daniels formed a group simply called Jerry and Charlie. They met Deke Watson in 1932 and became the Gates Brothers. But that was short-lived, so they started calling themselves King, Jack, and Jester. Orville Hoppy Jones soon joined too. Deke knew him from a former group they were in together, the 4 Riff Brothers, who had previously been called the Peanut Boys before Deke joined. Before that, Deke was in a band called the Percolating Poppies. Nice alliteration there. With 4 members now, growing tired of perpetually thinking of band names and wanting to concentrate more on the music, King, Jack, and Jester became King, Jack, and the Jesters. In 1933, they decided to relocate to New York after an opportune offer came up. They previously had been based in Indianapolis, Cleveland, and Cincinnati, which were all good cities in their own right, but they couldn't quite match the exposure that the Big Apple could provide, while at the same time also providing much stiffer competition. But there was a problem with their name. The well-known orchestra leader at the time, Paul Whiteman, had a group within his band called the King's Jesters. Since our protagonists were the newcomers to the scene, it felt like common courtesy that they would be the ones to make the change. So going back to their favorite pastime, they came up with the name the Riff Brothers. Not to be confused with the band Hoppy and Deke were in before. Remember the 4 Riff Brothers? Never mind. This one didn't stick either. So, the 4 Ink Spots were born. But there was another problem with it. There already was a group called the 3 Ink Spots in New York. But since you can always count on the generosity of New Yorkers, they let them try out their new name to see if it suits them. Ever tried out a pair of pants at a store? Band names worked kinda like that back then. The name fit well, and they finally became the Ink Spots. In 1934, they went on their first overseas tour in England, which went quite well. The following year, they got a record deal with Victor Records, and thus, the first 4 Ink Spots songs were put on vinyl. In case you haven't noticed, lots of swinging going round there. Unfortunately, their career with Victor Records would end as soon as it started. They received an advance and went back on their way to touring. They were starting to get a decent following, yet in early 1936, Jerry Daniels left. The reason he gave: too much work for too little money. So it appears that health reasons were involved in his decision. Their manager at the time thought the group wouldn't survive with just 3 members, so he brought in Bill Kenny to a rehearsal one day. And just like that, he became Jerry's replacement. Bill Kenny had won a few amateur singing contests with his silky smooth tenor voice, but he didn't quite fit in at the beginning. He he wasn't that comfortable with the swing song repertoire and he didn't play any instruments. However, they kept at it and good things were on the horizon. Later that year, they got signed to Decca. They were well known for making gramophones and just started their music label a few years earlier, but already included artists like the Mills Brothers, who were an early inspiration for the Ink Spots, and Bing Crosby, who went on to influence a slew of crooners in the decades that followed, even though he was someone who called himself Bing. Now with Decca behind them, they kept turning in record after record. At the beginning of 1939, songwriter Jack Lawrence had composed a nice little tune, or at least that's what he thought. It seems feedback wasn't positive. One day, a good friend of Jack's, Elliot Daniels, came to visit. He wasn't just a regular friend, he was also in the music industry, working as a pianist for Rudy Valley, a pretty big singer at the time.
You're driving me crazy.
Jack played the song for him, and Elliot's verdict was swift and brutal. Jack, forget it. It stinks. The thing was, Jack had already mailed a song called If I Didn't Care to Decca Records, and the Ink Spots would agree to record it, although they didn't care that much for it either. Accurate numbers are hard to come by, especially from that era, but over the years, the song sold about 20 million copies. Since, as mentioned, exact numbers of older singles are hardly precise, these numbers put it in the possibly top 10 biggest selling singles of all time. The next time Elliot saw Jack after the song's success, he said, "I still think it stinks." One fun way to recognize an Ink Spots track is by its opening notes. If you're hearing this guitar riff, you know what it is. If, for example, we look at the songs on their Greatest Hits album, out of 20 songs, 18 use a variation of the same intro. The songs create the signature sound for the Ink Spots. Some of the elements present here we'll encounter later, in One More Kiss Dear. Hearing them side by side, you can really see the similarities. I've seen people call it kind of a rip-off, but I disagree. I'd put it in the respectful homage category. We'll get back to this later.
And would I be sure that this is love beyond compare? Would all this be true if I didn't care for you?
Returning to the late 30s, the song was not just the hit they wanted, it was a massive influence at the time, and many bands started appearing that didn't just mimic their sound but pretty blatantly copied their formula. The first ones can be traced back to 1940. Actually, these bands were more or less pretending to be them. For example, their manager learned of a band somewhere in the South called Ink Spots, one word. Another group in New Orleans were calling themselves Famous Ink Spots. So lawyers started to get busy. Because back then, only one original The Ink Spots existed, that made it easier to keep the fakes in check. But more than a decade later, things would be much different. In 1952, Fuqua would leave and form his own Ink Spots group called Original Ink Spots. Before that, in 1944, Dick would get kicked out of the group and form the band The Brown Dots. He would briefly join Fuqua's Ink Spots, but then form his own Ink Spot band called, I don't know if you can guess this, The Ink Spots, which really got the ball rolling so hard that in 1967, a federal judge ruled that since so many bands were using the name Ink Spots, the name had become public domain. So, if you're a musician and don't have a name for your band yet, give the Ink Spots a try. While If I Didn't Care is still one of their most well-known songs, the top spot nowadays, if you go by streaming numbers, is probably taken by I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire, I presume the Fallout game series that featured the song had something to do with this.
I'll have reached the goal line, dreaming only
The series uses the song to this day with the recent live-action adaptation.
I just want to start.
I've had a rough week. Practically every person I've met up here has tried to kill me.
I'm simply going to harvest your organs.
You need to go home. You come from a world of rules, of laws.
The song itself, while being so perfectly fit to their musical style, is not the original recording. That honor belongs to Harlan Leonard and his Rockets.
I don't want to set this world on fire. I just want to start a flame in your heart.
And in 1941, the year the Ink Spots recorded it, there are almost 20 other covers by different bands. In 1982, before Blade Runner, the song would be featured in a TV commercial for the famous perfume Chanel No. 5 that Ridley Scott would direct.
I don't want to set the world on fire. I just want to start a flame in your heart.
Beyond time and fashion, today and tomorrow, share the fantasy.
The version he uses is from a 1979 album simply called The Ink Spots, If I Didn't Care. Bill Kenny sang the vocals uncredited. The other band members from the 1939 lineup were all gone. Happy Jones died on stage in 1944, Dick Watson in 1969, and Charlie Fuqua in 1971. Bill Kenny would also pass away in 1978, 1 year prior to the album's release. It seems the song was used without the approval of Bill Kenny's widow, so a legal battle ensued and the matter was settled out of court. What's not as well known, though, is that Blade Runner was not the first collaboration between Ridley Scott and Vangelis. The Chanel ad from before was actually the second one Ridley Scott directed for them, the first one being in 1979, shortly after the success of Alien. The music back then was signed by none other than you-know-who.
Share the fantasy. Chanel No. 5.
The legal battle with Bill Kenny's widow probably soured Scott's inclination on using another Ink Spots song for the film. Or maybe they couldn't get the rights due to the disagreements or the lawsuit over the Chanel ad. If I Didn't Care was used in the work print and also appeared in the first 2 trailers of the film. After that, the song is heard no more in either the film or subsequent trailers. The lyrics for One More Kiss Dear were written by Peter Skellern of Oasis, the original one, before a couple of proper and well-behaved English gentlemen began using the name. Skellern referred to them as Louts. Skellern released with Oasis only one album, also called Oasis, and is quite the musical journey and well worth a listen.
Hold me tonight in your arms. Hold me so nothing can harm us or drive apart. With no one but me in your heart.
I could listen to that all day. It's delightful. And with that out of the way, all that was needed was one good singer to make it really stand out. Why not his compatriot and also former colleague and graduate of the Barechest University, Demis Roussos. They had been together in the progressive rock band Aphrodite's Child. But wait, wasn't the singer called Don Percival? Was that a pseudonym for Demis Roussos? That can't be right. Roussos does appear on the track called Tales of the Future, so it can't be him. Luckily, we now have more info to piece together what might have occurred. Who was this mysterious singer? My curiosity was piqued many years ago, but information was scarce on the subject. Was it a pseudonym? Now, glimpses of his biography can be found, and although not much, we can get an idea of who Don Percival was. The most important source of information is an article in The Independent, written by Jeffrey Bachler, which also provides the only photo of the man, which I've been able to find so far, with his arm over...
It's not Pavarotti, it's not Domingo.
The other guy?
Yeah, the other guy.
Also known as Jose Carreras, best known to the wider world as one of the three tenors. Here is a clip from the 1964 Pink Panther film, A Shot in the Dark. We can see Donald John Percival playing the bass in this nudist colony scene. He started out his career as a singer and musician. He played the bass and sang in jazz bands, but music was, and still is, a tough business to earn a living in. So he took on new roles in the industry. In 1969, David Bowie's music career was in a pretty big slump. He signed a one-album deal with Philips Records. Don Percival was hired as an artist and repertoire director that same year. One of the songs on the album was Space Oddity. Percival wanted the single to be released 5 days before the Apollo 11 launch, the first manned moon landing. He would tell Bowie that if the song wasn't a hit, he'd quit the music industry. It would be number 5 on the UK singles chart. In 1980, he would go on his own into PR and music publishing. In regards to working with Carreras on his concerts all over the world, it appears that those were the most treasured moments of his career. He also worked with Pavarotti. He didn't appear to have worked with Domingo, though. He composed the title and music for the BBC series, Fighter Pilot. I wonder if he and Vangelis ever jammed together. So how did Percival become the singer of One More Kiss, Dear? Percival was Demis Roussos' agent in the UK, and my best guess is that he was asked by Roussos, knowing that he was also a singer, to record the track as a guide, which probably was so much to Vangelis' liking that it stuck. So the temporary singer became the perfect solution, and this was to be his only vocal recording. Or was it? His name has also been linked to an enduring mystery regarding an unknown singer, a subject which I will cover in my next video. Oh boy, this thing itches. As a final note, in 1997, Westwood Studios, best known for its Command & Conquer series, released the game Blade Runner. The game takes place in the same universe as the film, and contrary to most video games that are based on movies, it is a resounding success and a classic of the adventure game genre. I have spent many hours playing it and consider it a fun memory of my childhood. Near the bar in this scene, we can hear a song in the background, so familiar yet different. Its name, One More Time Love. Similar to the story of the movie, copyright problems meant that One More Kiss, Dear couldn't be used, so a similar track had to be created instead. Damn makeup. If an Inkspot band ever does cover the Blade Runner songs, we've truly come full circle. For the game, the music was composed by Frank Lepacki, and the song One More Time Love was sung by... I have no idea. Oh, no. I'm done with this video. Oh, well, you've made it to the end of the video, which means you liked what you saw. Or perhaps just put a video, any video in the background to hear a voice, any voice, as an antidote for your crippling loneliness. But that never works, does it? Regardless, I enjoyed having you as a spectator and would like to present a few of my other channels, links in the description, where I post some of my music. If you have a little extra time, perhaps you'd fancy giving them a visit, and if all the stars align, you might even get a little enjoyment out of them. Until our next encounter, goodbye.